My name is David Moore. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, and we're here today to give an update on the Cameron Peak Fire and some of the recent activity. So first, I'd like to introduce Chuck Russell, who is the Deputy Incident Manager for the Fire Incident Management Team.
Good afternoon. As mentioned, I'm Chuck Russell, the Deputy IC for the Incident Management Team. Just wanted to give a quick fire update. The last 3 days have been challenging. We've had about 10 miles that the fires ran, and it's exposed a lot of fire to these changing winds that we have coming towards with this front that's coming through. And so that's challenged us as far as the number of resources that we have and where we're positioning them. Right now, the fire is impacting the Highway 14 corridor as we speak. We've got resources that are in place along there. It has crossed Pingree Park Road, and it's on both sides of Highway or County Road 44H, I believe, which is the road that actually goes up towards Buckhorn. We've ordered 50 engines from the county and the state and the area resources around here. 25 of those have been filled as we speak. We're getting them set up to get into locations that we feel that the fire is going to impact. We're not sending all of them out just yet, but we are sending them out as the need arises and as we feel where we need to get them in place before the fire impacts any of the structures. I would say overall, we're holding our own right now. We are in a definite defensive posture, waiting and hoping that we get the weather that's going to come in sooner than later, and that the winds that are going to be here previous to that event and right after, before we get the moisture, don't affect us too terribly. That's where we sit right now.
Thank you, Chuck. So I just want to give you guys an update about the evacuations that have been put in place since this unfavorable weather came through, starting about on Saturday. So on Saturday at about 7 p.m., Crystal Lakes and Red Feather Lakes went into voluntary evacuations. They are still in voluntary evacuations. And then Sunday at about 11:45 in the morning, the Buckhorn Road, which is County Road 44H, from Pinnock Pass to County Road 27 went into mandatory evacuations. Also on Sunday about 4 p.m., County Road 74E, or the Red Feather Lakes Road, east from Red Feather Lakes, including Shambhala, Lady Moon, and Glacier View, up to and including Hewlett Gulch, went into voluntary evacuations as well. And then today we've had a lot of evacuations happening in different areas. So about 10 o'clock this morning, Glacier View went into mandatory evacuations. 10:15, Stove Prairie Landing south on County Road 27 to 44H and east to include Stratton Park went into mandatory evacuations. Again today at 10:30 a.m., all of County Road 52E, which is Risk Canyon Road, to include Davis Ranch Road, Well Rock, and west to County Road 27 went into voluntary evacuations, and that just changed right before we got started. At 3 o'clock they went into mandatory, so that same area is now in mandatory evacuations. At 11:35, Highway 14 from Kelly Flats to Stove Prairie Landing went into mandatory evacuations. And at 11:40, Highway 14 from Stove Prairie Landing to Gateway Park went into mandatory voluntary, and then that just changed at 3 o'clock as well. They are now in mandatory evacuations. So to give you a little context, when we send out these evacuations, it goes out through the Everbridge Emergency Notification System. And that system is sending those notifications to contacts, not individual people, so contacts, and I'll explain that here in a minute. Under all of the current evacuation areas, 7,657 contacts have been notified that they are in the evacuation area. Now again, that does not mean individual people, it does not mean individual homes, and I'll explain why. So a landline counts as a contact. If someone has a landline, they're automatically going to get that notification. They cannot opt out of that. However, you can opt in on your cell phone. You can opt in on email. You can opt in for places that you don't even live. For instance, I opt in for my wife's, where she works, for my children's school. so I can get those emergency alerts about things that are happening around those places. So we know from the beginning of this fire, we had a lot of people. There were not that many homes in the area where the fire started, but there were actually quite a few contacts. So we've learned that people have registered to find out about things going on in their favorite hunting area, fishing area, camping area, recreation area, and stuff like that. So the 7,657 obviously are not individual homes and not individual people. For instance, at my house, between my wife and I and my son, I think we total 8 contacts total for one household, right? So even if it is a house, they could have multiple contacts for that one house. A couple of things we want to help point people to. So if people are looking for information about the Cameron Peak Fire, we ask that they go to larimer.org, and on the top of any page, they can click on the link that says Cameron Peak Fire Info. That is a page that the Sheriff's Office is managing. We're trying to keep that as up to date as we possibly can, with maps, evacuation areas, road closures, helpful information about how you get shelter if you've been evacuated, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's a very helpful website. We'd like more people to visit that. If people have not already, they can visit nocoalert.org and actually see those evacuation maps. They can type in their address. It'll show them on the map where their house is, how close they are to an evacuation area, or maybe they're in an evacuation area. So it's a very intuitive map. If they want to check on a friend or relative who lives in the area, they can do that as well. NCWeb obviously is where folks go to get the overall picture of the fire activity and what the incident management team is doing about the fire. And we also want people to know that our Joint Information Center, or JIC, opened yesterday, and we are going to be open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. as long as it is needed. And the phone number for the JIC is 970-980-2500. That's 970-980-2500. And we encourage people to call that number. We have the phones manned from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We want people to call us if they're not sure about what's going on. They just want us to walk them through something or help them. They're not sure about which roads they can take, or maybe they can't reach a relative who lives in one of the evacuation areas. That's what we're there for, and we're happy to help with those things. So now, unless anyone has any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Smith. Sheriff?
Thanks, David.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being here. Again, we're at a surreal time as we stand here and everybody's watching the ash that's literally falling on the Front Range. It's falling on us right now. This has been, over the last few days, a very regular. And I was told a little bit earlier today when I was up on the fire that the street lights in Fort Collins had come on. It literally got like night. What I wanted to do first is clarify this still remains a federal fire. The fire team is managing that. We've been going since, I believe, August 13th, if my memory is accurate. It seems like forever. But up until this time, we've had evacuations. We've had residents move out of the way. But until now, we really hadn't gotten to the point it was really running. You've seen the numbers. People know what those numbers are for the increase. And I would say it's fair to assume this thing continues to grow exponentially. I'm here today because we've gotten to that point that a couple of things are happening. It's getting into areas with structures, and we've had to pull the pen on evacuations at a level that we'd never expected. We had these maps and polygons drawn. We watched this fire as we've had differing degrees of red flag weather over the last nearly a month. However, we'd seen it stay pretty consistent in size after a few days. At this point, we've seen tremendous growth that pushed it, and as the incident management team mentioned, made huge, about a 10-mile run in a day or two, which it hadn't done in 3 weeks or more before that. And so what I wanted to do is David was able to give you the specifics on the evacuations, and that information's public, but I wanted to go into a little bit of a why that these evacuations over such broad areas, and give a little personal perspective, because I apologize for keeping you a little late. I literally came off the fire line to get down here, and I wanted to share with the community what this looks like, because from right here, you have no idea what's up in the mountains, and it varies as you get up in there. So as far as the evacuations, when we saw that run that came across, and it was on the south side of Poudre Canyon, again, it hung up for weeks up in there, but it took off in the last couple of days, made that 10-mile run, got up over Pingree Park Road. I was actually at Jack's Gulch
yesterday and just maybe an hour before it crossed over there. Just as some points for folks on structures, there's definitely a lot of structures that are under threat, some imminent threat, some immediate threat, and some further out. When you hear the numbers on those evacuations, one of the things I want to make sure the public knows is in doing those, as we're moving to areas where there's high populations, it takes a significant amount of time for deputies. The Buckhorn Canyon and be right down to Stove Prairie Road and cause another push from there. So that's why we started jumping on the areas like Stratton Park, really everything around Wrist Canyon. Literally at this point, we're going through an evacuation and telling the crews, when you get done with that, grab a bite, gas up your car, and be ready for the next wave. So we're having to time those. But I can tell you every hour that we get nearer 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock this evening, it's tremendous relief, because we know those forecasts bring a change in weather. Again, that weather does bring risk, but that change in weather will change things. What we can't afford to do is say we're keeping our fingers crossed it doesn't hit these areas. We're not going to get anybody killed. We're going to do everything we can to protect folks. The priorities are individual health and welfare, livestock and pets, making sure folks can get to that, and then property obviously comes behind there. So we're pushing those, and this fire has gone many different directions, which makes it extremely difficult on us. We can't say it's going one direction. We have to worry about evacuations in one direction. As we've seen, it jumped up and was making that run up into Monument Gulch. All the reports I have, because we've got some spotters up there, is it so far, as of 15 minutes ago when I talked to my last spotter, seemed to be kind of hung up in that area. Thankfully, it wasn't running down the Buckhorn yet, which, in all honesty, I anticipated when David set this up 4 hours ago, I'd be here talking about the areas where we were just losing structures in mass numbers. I feared that's where we were going to be based on what we had just seen over the last couple of days. We're not there now. It's nice and cool down here. I can tell you up in the Rustic area, it was 85 degrees up there when I started down a little over an hour ago. So it's very different weather up there. The wind, we're not getting wind down here. The wind up high is definitely there. There's a wind out of the west that's pushing east. So first I talked about that area up at Pennock Pass. It's kind of held up there. And the reason I bring that up is, again, it hasn't gone down the Buckhorn, but I don't have a good assessment for my residents in Monument Gulch. That area, I had one of my staff members up there, was liaison with the team, and he literally got out maybe 3 hours ago. It got too dangerous for him, and I don't have any reports on structures up there right now, good or bad, but I know it's hung up in that area. We did not see it pushing down Pingree, thankfully, over towards Glacier View. However, we know this weather front's going to bring a lot of swirling, and if that fire happens to take a turn and get pushed to the north, it could get to Glacier View very fast. So I still stand by the logic for getting those notifications to folks up there, because if it makes that turn, and it could in a moment, turn north, it could be deadly very quick. The part I can also report on is I just came down from the Poudre City area because there were reports of the fire that was coming down into Rustic, and that the Poudre Canyon Fire Department literally had to abandon their Station 2 just a couple miles beyond Rustic. So I got up into that area as that fire was coming down the mountain. There was significant torching. However, once that main front got in and kind of passed through there, it appeared to be mostly staying on the south side on the mountain there. It was getting in near structures. I actually helped call in some structure protection, and again, literally was on the line as we were doing some protection between hand tools and engines up there. And I'm pleased to say, so far, when I left a little over an hour ago, I didn't see any structures that had burned. Excuse me. This fire is very personal for everybody up there. They've been through a lot between the fires and floods over the last decade, and to see it coming in there is it's difficult. But I come down with some hope, seeing what was done for structure protection. That main front had moved past there, and so with active structure protection, I definitely feel better. We're not out of the woods by any means. That fire is still laying up to the south side of the canyon and has that potential to come back in. I know there was a report from one of the individuals up there that by Kinnick, there were some spots that had gotten on the north side. That concerns me greatly, because that potentially could drive, if it's in the right area, could cause that drive back up to Red Feather and Crystal Lakes, and also Glacier View, etc. So with that, again, I'm extremely pleased that where we're at right now is not where I feared we were going to be 6 or 8 hours ago. The day's not over. Snow's not here yet, and we certainly know the snow is no guarantee to make it's certainly not going to stop this fire, but it's going to give a break. We've been very active in our discussions with the incident management team, how critical it is that we make sure that that break hopefully gives the opportunity to move a little more on the offensive to help us in that structure protection. I understand there's a significant number of structure protection engines either here or on their way, because we're hitting those areas that it could flat get into structures, which we haven't had that much in the last month. So we're definitely getting there. Some good reports about where we're at, but there's still a long ways to go. So I just wanted to use the media to share with the public kind of where we're at. My tremendous gratitude for all the fire personnel, for the National Guard, the other law enforcement folks, for the community, and all their outpouring of support for everybody up there. Without a tremendously dedicated bunch of folks, we'd be in a very different place. So that's what I have to share. What I'm going to do is actually ask Commissioner Kafalis to come up, share a few words, and then if you have some more questions, we can go to that. So.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. My name is John Kafalis, Larimer County Commissioner, District 1. Much of the area of the Cameron Peak Fire is located in District 1, the northern one-third of Larimer County. I'm here primarily to show moral support, logistical support, and resource support for the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. I'm here to show that support on behalf of the Larimer County Board of Commissioners. We have various roles when these kinds of natural disasters occur, and certainly one of those roles is to put in place the necessary disaster emergency declarations, and by doing so, we are able to access federal and state resources to complement the local resources to get the job done. Our Office of Emergency Management works very closely with the Sheriff's Office and the state and federal folks, and I guess in closing, I would say that obviously something of this magnitude requires an extraordinary amount of coordination and cooperation, and that's what we're seeing. And again, I just wanted to be here in support of the Sheriff's Office. When I was coming down 287 yesterday, below the Red Feather Lakes Road, County Road 74E, I noticed at least 6 sheriff's deputy patrol cars zooming up the road, and I assume they were heading up to Red Feather Lakes, Livermore area, Glacier View Meadows. I have friends and constituents that live there, and so it's personal for all of us. Last night, or this morning, excuse me, I was looking at a Facebook post that someone in Glacier View Meadows was posting from last evening, showing flames in the background, and that was one of the folks that had to evacuate her home this morning. Thank you all very much. Thanks, Sheriff.
Sheriff, there are mandatory evacuations in place. Mandatory means mandatory, but we understand some people are refusing to evacuate. What would you say to that?
Well, let me first say that happens in any time that you do evacuations, or some folks just exercise their right to say, I'm staying in place. We just give them the best recommendations. By the time we get to mandatory, we consider there to be an imminent threat. And so, we make it clear to them, the circumstances they're under. We encourage them to get out because, the chance of responders going back in there at that point is extremely low. So, we think that's not a good choice. However, we deal with this, and we understand people make their own choices.
How many people would you guess are under mandatory evacuation right now?
How many people under mandatory evacuation? Do you have any kind of guess on that, David?
I don't on the people yet. That's something that we really have to drill down into, and a lot of.
Oh, come on.
Sorry. We don't have a specific number of people, and one of the big issues that we run into is a lot of those cabins and homes up there are second homes or vacation homes, so they're not even full-time residences. A lot of folks that we've talked to who live down here, live down in the Denver area or whatever, are calling and asking for permission to go up and winterize their home now, those types of things, or go check on things or whatever. So as far as the number of people who have actually been displaced, that's something that we'll try to have to circle back maybe much later in this incident and try to get a handle on that.
In the thousands?
I would say that's fair. And again, some of those may just be part-time residents as well, but I would say in the thousands is fair.
Do you expect any more evacuation orders to be issued?
Do we expect any more evacuation orders is the question. There's certainly the potential. The same areas we talked about before. We're really getting all the way down Risk Canyon at this point. And again, because even though it's hung up at the top at Pennock Pass, with this weather, if it gets really dicey, it could make an amazing run, and we'd be into areas very quickly. We're also continuing to evaluate and talk to the incident management team about concerns they have for the Glen Haven area. We talked a little bit yesterday when we did the online community meeting about areas like Dunraven Glade Road, the Retreat, even that lower part of Glen Haven. At this, again, we're continuing to watch. We have not pulled triggers on any of those. This fire has been full of more surprises than we've ever seen, and certainly you've seen that over the last 72 hours. So if they're needed, we'll go to them. We have more polygons put together, but we're not pulling a trigger now. But again, we have them really stacked right now. We have them, and David covered those more in detail. But we really had to prioritize, even though we said, hey, we have all these different ones. What we didn't want to do is push out a notification until we could get roadblocks up and get the crews back there to make those notifications. And when we do that, we flag every house that we go to. We keep logs of that. Now, and we do our best to keep those. Sometimes we get assistance of people that may not have the logs. So this thing isn't over by any means. We've seen the last 48, 72 hours. It's got a lot of energy in it. This weather, if it comes through like we anticipate, will buy us a break, but it certainly can jump back up from there. There's a lot of fuel still left.
And in just the last 5 minutes, guys, we've actually sent out 2 new evacuation notices. So that's how quickly things are changing. Voluntary, mandatory, did you catch it?
One of each.
1 voluntary, 1 mandatory. I don't have the specific details, but if you go to nocoalert.org, it'll pull up on that map and you'll see them, and you can click on each evacuation area. It'll pull up some text to the left of it and tell you when that was implemented and the specific area, if you don't know the boundaries necessary, to give you roads and stuff like that. So just in the last 5 minutes, we've had 2 more. We certainly hope that's slowing down. But as the sheriff said earlier, weather's changing. We're staying hopeful.
Sheriff, how long have you lived and worked in here?
How long have I been here? 30 years in Larimer County. I've been with the sheriff's office since 1991, and I've been the sheriff since 2011. I know these areas very personal. I know a lot of the folks. I consider them friends, and as you witnessed a few minutes ago, I get a little choked up when I think about it because I'm alongside friends up there when you're defending structures and you're standing by folks that are seeing the potential for their own home to burn up.
How you've seen a lot of different things happen up here, like the floods you mentioned.
Yeah.
You said this has had a lot of surprises. How has this been different than anything else? How has this disaster been different than any
Very,
other?
very good question. How is this one different? We talked in the beginning about, there's two measures that occurred in the last decade here. The first one was High Park Fire, and there were some few Woodland Heights and a few others at the same time. And then just barely a year later, there were the massive floods that came through. With High Park, that one was different in that it went in a different way, that it started up in a populated area, and literally for about 2 days, all we did was run ahead of it and push people out, and literally they were getting out right in front of the flames. This fire started different in that it was clear up in the back, almost near the Continental Divide area. It sat there, it grew, but it sat there for quite some time. And our biggest fear throughout this was that fire moved north, and the fire teams worked with us, and a lot of their efforts on protection went on that north end because of areas like Crystal Lakes and Red Feather Lakes. It's different because it never made those runs. It's made some runs, but it hadn't taken that huge leap all the way up there. But then as it stayed low, it continued to kind of really push up against the Continental Divide, up against Cameron Pass, and for, again, better part of 3 weeks, it really didn't make a run out. It made some runs south of Highway 14. Again, that didn't push towards structures. It pushed towards public lands that the people up here love, and considered personal and dear. But when the difference on this is, in a matter of literally 24 to 48 hours, it went, I think they said about 10 miles, and just flat covered ground. And so it was doing that at the same time. It has that potential again to go south down into Dunraven Glade and into the Glenhaven area. Has that potential to run east. And honestly, fires like this can, with the right weather, run till they run out of fuel. And if you look east, that fuel really ends at the edge of the city of Fort Collins. It has that potential again to run back down Pingree Park Road, jump the Poudre Canyon, and be back into that area, Glacier View, Red Feather Lakes, Crystal Lakes. So the fact that we're really, this is like a battle you're fighting on multiple fronts. And so we're having to prepare it in a lot of different directions. And some of these calls are going to be in a direction that didn't go. But other times we can't afford to roll the dice and say, well, it's just a 30% chance, because this wind's, they're talking about it whipping around, can go north, can go south. So in that way, to be this far into a fire, we've talked a lot about avoiding complacency. It definitely is a kick in the gut that just on Thursday, working with the fire team, we came to an agreement to reopen some areas that have been closed for a couple of weeks because of the threat of fire. And then literally in 2 days, that all changed and went from those to just exploding, not only in size of the fire, but in individuals and properties and residents that are potentially an imminent threat.
Sheriff, you've asked for help in determining the possible cause of this fire. Have you made any progress?
The cause on the fire, I'm going to defer that back to the U.S. Forest Service. This fire started on Forest Service land, and I know they have an investigative team. I don't have any of the information. That'll come through the Forest Service. So I don't know at this time what the cause originally was.
You acknowledge that there were some people under mandatory evacuation who refused to evacuate. Do you possibly have any estimate of how many people that would be?
A question about how many under mandatory who have not evacuated. I don't know those numbers. I know in a series, as much as we're all electronic, when we do these evacuations, we're down to paper logs. And so what we do is keep a record if we came across an individual, but we catch them, actually the time we catch them isn't the voluntary. because by the time we get to mandatories, we literally don't have time to go back. So what we've done is say, we're going to give the voluntary and say, this is the time we recommend that you get out. The difference is we don't keep them from going back in on a voluntary, but then we let them know that when it goes mandatory, we're going to push that back out through our notification system, but we can't get back to touch the individual properties and stuff. So I don't know how many are back there. I don't think it's a tremendous percentage, and as the fire gets closer, you see those folks pulling out, and there's a variety of areas. The ones that concern us most are the ones that only have one way out and are way back in. Those concern me the most. But we've also got individuals, like along Highway 14, where we've recommended they get out, but we also understand they're right on a state highway and have access to get out, and there's a little less concern. So it really varies on those concerns. All right, thank you very much.
Sorry, I had one more. Could you just describe what it looks like up there?
Yeah.
And actually on what it looks like up there, I'm going to share with David some pictures I took this morning from two different areas. One of those was by the Stove Prairie School, and again, High Park. All through High Park, I never saw something like this with the stuff falling out of the sky being as dark as it was. And the other I'm going to share are some pictures from the rustic Poudre City area. Gives you an idea. As I was up at Stove Prairie, it was just so much smoke. You'd swear that fire was only a mile or two away, but it was all the way up at Pennock Pass. But it's just kicking off a ton of smoke. And then when you were down in rustic area, there was a lot of torching, and that's why I literally expected when I got into there that I was going to have to watch rustic completely burn up because of the way it was coming in there. However, so far, and that front seems to have done its thing, but it certainly could come back. After all that torching, it wasn't getting into the structures that we could see up there, and because that active wall really had died down, the structure teams were getting back in. They literally had engines. There were hotshot crews coming in, etc. So I will share those pictures so David can share them with you as well.
Yeah, I saw you watching the ash blow around, and what is that like for them up there working? Because if we have this down here, what's that like up there for the firefighters?
It's very interesting because there's quite a variety. There's areas up there that are literally blue sky. You can see smoke off in the distance, but there's areas of the canyon it's not in currently, but there's other areas, you can't see much beyond the edge of the road. It gets so thick up in there. But yeah, the stuff that's falling down here is pretty significant. The stuff falling up there is a lot larger. So definitely you couldn't be up in that area without understanding the seriousness and the threat. And it's a bit overwhelming when you're in that because you have no idea what's a mile or two away. You don't know what's coming next. And that's what this fire has. There's just all sorts of active areas. It's not a single front. So that's why it's extremely dangerous, and we have to use so much caution with all the personnel.
And then just to be clear, is the snow helpful or not helpful in fighting it, and why?
I'm going to hand this back to the deputy IC. That's right down his category.
Thanks.
So the snow is very helpful. It's going to what we call park the fire and give us an opportunity to be more aggressive on the fire and not be in such a defensive posture. However, there's a lot of fire on the ground. There's a lot of heavy fuels out there, and it's not going to put it out. There's still going to be a lot of work to do on this fire.
I wanted to add one thing if I could. If you guys could help us spread the word, we would really appreciate it. So tonight at 7:30 on the Cameron Peak Fire Facebook page, they're going to do a live Facebook community meeting. So if you could help us spread the word, get people to tune into that. There'll be folks there from the incident management team, Forest Service, Sheriff's Office, maybe some others that I'm missing. But those are usually very informative, and people can actually type in questions and get answers to a lot of those questions. So 7:30 tonight on Facebook on the Cameron Peak Fire Facebook page. Thank you, guys.